All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're basically running a full diagnostic on the most important tool you have, your brain. Think of this as a much-needed upgrade for your mental software.
So let me ask you something. Have you ever been in one of those arguments? A heated debate. You're making these amazing points, but the other person just seems to be arguing against something you never even said? It is so frustrating, right? Well, if that sounds familiar, then you have met what's called the straw man fallacy. It's this sneaky tactic where someone misrepresents your argument just to make it weaker and easier to knock down. And this straw man? It's just one of a whole family of hidden bugs that can mess with our reasoning, often running in the background without us even noticing. Yeah, that straw man is really just the tip of the iceberg. So for our first section, let's pull back the curtain and meet some of the most common hidden bugs in our thinking. Let's talk about logical fallacies.
So, what even is a fallacy? At its core, it's just a mistaken reasoning. It's a flaw that makes an argument totally invalid. The tricky part, and the reason they're so common, is that they often sound really persuasive. They kind of dress up like good logic, which is why it's so incredibly easy to fall for them.
Let's meet our first culprit, the false dilemma. This one is a classic. It's a mental trap where we oversimplify everything into a black and white, this or that choice, and we completely ignore the huge spectrum of other possibilities that are actually out there. We hear this kind of stuff all the time, don't we? You're either a leader or a follower. But stop and think about that for a second. Is that really true? Can't you be a leader on one project and then a great team member on another? Of course you can. This is a false dilemma. It's a trick to force you into a corner by hiding all the other options. Okay, next up we've got a fallacy that literally traps us in a loop, the vicious circle. What makes this one so tricky is that it just keeps feeding itself. It's when your solution to a problem accidentally creates a new problem that brings the first one roaring right back. And oh boy, this is the perfect example, isn't it? It is so relatable it almost hurts. The solution, more coffee, is the very thing causing the problem it's supposed to be fixing. You're stuck in this feedback loop and it is so hard to break out of, unless you can step back and see it for what it is. All right, next up is a really big one that we see everywhere. It's called the common belief fallacy. This is the simple but pretty dangerous assumption that, hey, if a lot of people believe something, then it must be true. But as history has shown us over and over again, popularity is not proof. Think about this one. Everyone says this fashion trend will never come back. We've all said it, right? And then sure enough, a few years later, that exact trend is everywhere. It's a funny little example, but it points to a serious flaw in our thinking. We're so easily swayed by the crowd, even when the evidence shows the crowd is wrong. A lot. So, here's the deal. We really have a choice here. We can operate on what you might call default thinking. That's our brain's autopilot, It's ruled by emotion, by habit, by bias. Or we can choose critical thinking. This is a much more deliberate approach, one that's guided by evidence, by logic, and by self-awareness. And that is the mental upgrade we are talking about. So if these fallacies are the bugs in our mental software, how do we fix it? How do we debug our own minds? Well, that brings us to our next section, the antidote. And it's all about learning to wield the power of critical thinking. So what is critical thinking really? Well, it's an active, intentional process of analysis. And maybe the most important thing to get here is that it's not about thinking more, it's about thinking better. It's the skill of stepping back, looking at your own thought process and evaluating it, which in the end leads to way better judgments. And when you start thinking better, the results are, well, they're profound. So what's the actual payoff for all this effort? Let's jump into our third section and explore the incredible power of an upgraded critical mind. The big takeaway here is just how practical these benefits are. Seriously, this isn't some abstract philosophy. These are real, tangible skills for your life. We're talking about sharpening your focus, being able to cut through all the noise to find what actually matters, and, crucially, telling the difference between a fact and an opinion. It all adds up to making you a better communicator and a much, much sharper decision maker. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? It perfectly captures what we're talking about. A real education isn't about how many facts you can cram into your head. It's about developing the skill to analyze, to question, and to apply that information in a meaningful way. It's the difference between being a human search engine and being a true thinker. Okay, so the why is pretty clear. Now let's get to the how. In our final section, we're going to move from theory straight into practice.
It is time to start thinking better today, and here are your first steps. Here it is, your starter kit. 4 simple but incredibly powerful steps. First, always know your goal. If you don't know what you're aiming for, any path can look right. Second, actively hunt for your biases. Look, we all have them. The only way to stop them from running the show is to drag them out into the light. Third, break down big problems. Complex problems feel way less intimidating when you tackle them one piece at a time. And finally, the golden rule. Base opinions on facts. Build your arguments on a solid foundation of evidence, not just feelings.
So there you have it. We've identified the bugs in our thinking, and now we have the antidote. The only thing left to do is actually apply it. So I'll leave you with this final thought. Using these new tools, what's one decision you'll rethink today?